we go. It's that time again. Another episode of What Else You Got with Margo and Mitch. Hey, Mitch, what else you got to talk about?
Well, I got a very interesting find that I found recently. So there's a video where there's a jet ski on a lake, and it's just a nice flat lake, and it's got a caption something to the effect of, "It doesn't look like you're making any progress," and then it pans onto the back end of the jet ski until you look behind you, and you can see that the jet ski is at full speed. It's got a wake behind it, but it's just got this flat lake, and it's really interesting how perspective really changes your perception on things, which perspective and perception, another one of those fun word combos, which
Yes,
technically they're the same thing.
perspective and perception. Good words, really good words. And I absolutely love this concept. It applies to mental health, it applies to goal setting and goal achievement. One of my favorite books called The Artist's Way, it talks about this concept also, because as you're working toward a goal, whether it's your mental health or just changing a habit in your life, sometimes it feels like you're not making any progress because you are in the car. But when you're sitting in a car looking forward, you don't necessarily recognize the velocity at which you're moving. And so when you take a wider view perspective of what's happening, you can see how fast that car is moving that you're in, or like you mentioned, the jet ski. And so you actually are making a ton of progress toward your goal, but because you're in the vehicle, or you are the vehicle that is moving toward that goal, you don't necessarily recognize the velocity or the progress that you've made, because when you're sitting in the car, it feels like you're not moving at all.
There's lots of cool tidbits on that. Just off of car, the thing in the car not moving. I have so many weird tangents on that. But as you're talking, I was thinking about parallax. So parallax is another interesting concept. So Google defines parallax as a displacement or difference in the apparent position of an object viewed along two different lines of sight. It's measured by the angle or half angle of inclination between those two lines, which is a big thing that just says things look different depending on where you're at. And depending on what definition we're going off of, because one of which is if you're sitting in the car, everything in the car is with you. You look out the window, and out in the distance, it's slowly moving. But if you look at the guardrail next to the car, and it's all one of those things that the parallax between those makes it look like one thing's not moving, one thing's moving super quick, and one thing's barely moving. And so it's all dependent. And then if we're getting really technical, for those who use binoculars, monocular scopes, and whatnot, parallax is also a term where if you get your lenses in the scope lined up wrong, you get this weird effect where the parallax makes it where you can't see as much.
I'm going to ask Google, what's the word history behind parallax? Because that's an interesting word. Originates from the Greek word parallaxis, meaning change or alternation. Not alteration, but alternation.
Interesting.
Define alternation. The repeated occurrence of two things in turn.
Yeah. Do you think alternator?
No, I didn't think alternator. That's not where my brain goes.
I think too much engineer.
I think the word parallax is a super cool word with a super cool meaning, which needs to be like diagrammed out with objects in a diagram.
Technically, there is a diagram on the Google thing, which technically is Wikipedia, but it's definitely very interesting how it works. But I think it's a very good way to describe kind of that jet ski video, where at the angle you're looking at, and especially because there's no point of reference, it doesn't look like anything's moving. But as soon as you add a point of reference, like a wake, you can see things are moving quite quickly, even though the far objects are far enough away where it doesn't look like they're getting any closer.
My therapist, I go to therapy once a week. One of my favorite topics to talk about. My therapist had said that as you're progressing in your mental health, the people who are not progressing with you don't necessarily, oh, she's so much smarter than I am. We should just call her up and ask her to explain this. But I'm relating it to this word parallax, and I'm relating it to the concept of being in the car and traveling and seeing how fast things are actually moving in your own velocity and trying to achieve your own goals. But she was trying to explain how people from your past who are used to you behaving a certain way in your past then encounter you in your future after you have been working on your mental health and trying to utilize different skills and respond in different healthier ways. It's hard for them to relate to you because they've not traveled that path with you.
Yeah,
And
there's a really interesting concept. So Dan Martell, author of Buy Back Your Time, he shares a really interesting concept of if you're trying to do something that everyone you know hasn't done before, like start a business. If you're from a group that has never started a business, why would you ask your friends and family who've never started a business for advice on how to start a business when they have never achieved that themselves? And so it's one of those that, kind of like what you're saying, where people that gravitate towards your past and then circle back in the future with you, they see this major difference. It really comes down to why seek advice from someone who doesn't have the goal or vision that you have. And if you ask them, they'll say, just get a 9 to 5. It's really easy. You don't have to figure out how to start a business. You don't have to worry about where the money's coming from. And because they're comfortable with where they're at. And if you're asking them to move beyond where they want to, they will either try to hold you back or they won't travel the journey with you.
yeah, yeah. And another thing, I should have looked, if I'd known we were going to talk about these things, I would have looked them up ahead of time. There's a story, and I don't know if it was actually ever true, but I'm trying to look it up. But a long, long time ago, I don't even know how to ask Google. I was told this story about how a certain type of crab, you don't actually have to keep them in a cage because anytime one of the crabs would try to crawl out of the container, the other crabs would pull it back down. Have you ever heard that?
Yep. So it's usually why you don't need to put a lid on a bucket full of crabs. Because if you have one crab, it can get out by itself. But if you have 2 or more crabs, they will keep each other pulled down.
So, yeah. So you were talking about wanting to start a business and who you're going to ask for advice, and the idea of people saying, "Oh, it'll just be easier to just work a 9 to 5." Well, that feels like those crabs to me. You've got this great idea, start a business. It might seem scary to other people, and other people would rather you just stay in the bucket and just stay with the crowd. Don't be different. Don't be trying to crawl out of the crowd. I mean, but really, why would the other crabs actually care? Why don't they just let that one crab crawl out? See ya. Why do they pull the crab back down?
That's one of those topics I don't know the exact science behind it, but I just know
What? I
that's
thought
what they
you knew
do.
everything. You're like this depth of knowledge. You know all of these things. You know words like parallax and biblioclast, and you know all these amazing words. How do you not know the answer to this? Why do those crabs pull the one crab back down? Why?
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have our comment section figure that one out and start a discussion in the comment section.
I want to know.
But if you want another one of those interesting tidbits of animal behavior, if you stick a frog in a pot, if it's hot water, it jumps straight out. But if you
Yeah.
slowly turn up the temperature, it can't tell the difference, and that's how you cook a frog.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Also,
Yep.
same thing with lobsters.
Oh, okay. Well, now
Mm-hmm.
that we're talking about the death of animals, that seems pretty depressing. What else you got?
So then, no, I was going to say, what else you got so that you can go through some of your
Okay,
points.
I have something. I typically consider myself a pretty kind person. I'm a good natured, well intentioned, kind person. But there are three types of people that really just make me want to pick up my baseball bat or, punch them in the face. I get my feathers. See, I can't even talk. I get my feathers ruffled anytime I have to interact with a narcissistic bully. So that's one type. Second type is definitely don't want to interact with a pedophile. Don't like them either. And men who tell women to just smile a little bit more. Yep.
Care to elaborate?
I don't know what it is about me, but anytime I I find myself in a situation where I'm interacting with a narcissist, it just my hackles go up and I just want to push back and I just want to argue with the narcissist. I have watched so many videos about how to communicate with a narcissist. There are so many good video tips out there because I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to evolve. I'm trying to, be in the car traveling down the road or the jet ski on the water. But I'll tell you what, put me in a conversation with a narcissistic bully and I fall off that jet ski. I pull that car over. I get my baseball bat out and I just want to go to war with a narcissist. Do you know how to communicate well with a narcissist?
Depends on which way you want to communicate. If you want to encourage them to do certain behavior, there's two different ways you can approach it. You either stroke their ego or you challenge their ego, and that's how you're able to encourage them to do certain behavior. If you want them to do something that might be something they want to do, you say, "Hey, so I know that there's this really cool thing that will just make you undeniably the best person around." And they go, "I'm listening. What do you got?" And then you say, "Yeah, if you pick up this mop and go mop the floor," and they go, "That's below me." And then that now, but if you say, "Hey, if you go get this Ferrari from the lot and go drive it," they go, "Oh yeah," mm-hmm. And they'll go right into it. Or what you do is you can challenge one other thing, saying, "Hey, so you're aware people don't really like it when you leave trash on the ground, or when people leave trash on the ground, because if you target them directly, they get more cranky. But if you target something else, they tend to not get as cranky. But if you say, yeah, the people who leave trash, they're just horrible, and it's one of those that they'll probably jump on your bandwagon even though they're the offender, but you'll notice that they'll slowly stop doing it because they want to stroke their ego and say, oh yeah, I'm the best one around. Now, if you flip it slightly different, you want to see who can make the biggest mess, you change the tune a little bit, and then they'll definitely make the biggest mess because they got to be the biggest and most awesomest. But that's more along the lines of subtle encouragement or manipulation. But if you want to try to encourage more accurate information out of them, like you want to get their opinion and not just the inflated facade, you have to figure out a way to make them feel safe, so that they're able to open up without risking their facade.
It just feels like so much work to me. I would just rather be able to speak directly and assertively, get my message across, and move on to the next task. If I have to temperature gauge and consider the best ways to navigate, it just feels like so much work to me.
Yep, and that's why narcissism has its own category and why it has generally a negative connotation, because people generally don't like working with them because it's a lot of work to communicate with them.
It's a lot of work. It's exhausting, absolutely exhausting. I also am not a real big fan of men who tell women that they should just smile more.
Care to share more?
Are you a culprit? Have you ever told a woman that she should smile more?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's good. Don't do it. It's not nice. That's all I have to say. What else you got?
Okay. Well, so uh, a really interesting acronym that I came across, FEAR. I don't know, you're thinking fear, scary, boo.
No, I think
And
I've heard this in all my years of business and sales and recruiting. I think I know what it stands for, but it's somewhere in the depths of my brain. I'm trying to access
oh,
those long dust covered files.
all right, let's see if it rings a bell. False evidence appearing
Real.
real. Yep. Yep. False evidence appearing real. And so it's one of those, it goes to the larger philosophy of if you don't try, you automatically fail. And so if you fear doing something and you fail to try, then you have already failed. And so it really just is one of those things that with this acronym, it really comes down to if you try, then you have a chance to succeed. If you don't try, you never have a chance to succeed.
That's correct. Goes right along the lines of my philosophy of never accept a no from someone who does not have the authority to give you a yes.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those that find the people who can best enable you to achieve your goals.
Yes. Yeah, I think that circles right back to what you said before with why would you ask for business advice from someone who's never ran their own business? You know, um, don't accept a no from someone who doesn't have the authority to give you a yes. Don't take advice from someone who doesn't have the experience or knowledge in that area. And yes, fear, false evidence appearing real. These are all closely
Now,
related.
one of the really interesting things that you did say just now was someone who has the knowledge and experience. So I definitely fit in the category of a bunch of random knowledge. Doesn't mean I have the experience to back what I say. I just know what some textbooks say, what some online opinion says, but I don't know how viable it is. But there are quite a few different things that I at least try, and I can tell you as far as my experience. But it really just comes down to the I can tell you what I've experienced, but I can't tell you what works best for you. I can tell you what uh, I've seen work. I've seen what applies to your scenario and your personality, but I don't know what is the winning combination for you.
Well, that that is totally valid. And again, it relates right back to the car and the jet ski. You used an example of a jet ski. I used an example of a car. We were talking about the same concept. We used two different experiences to describe the same concept. And so, yes, while the experience might be different, the knowledge might be the same, the end result might be similar, the concept might be similar. Yeah.
Yeah, which that really is sometimes the best advice is from a panel of people. That's why so many places do panel interviews because it's the same topic, but you get 12 different opinions on it. And some of them are in direct contrast to each other's, and probably half of them are in direct alignment with each other. And it really just comes down to everyone has a slightly different opinion, and it really comes down to what opinion best fits for what you're trying to do.
That's an interesting concept that you just brought up, panel discussions. If you're going to a conference, any type of conference, type of conference is irrelevant to the question I'm about to ask. But you're going to a conference and you've got different, you know, breakout classes to choose from. Are you going to choose a class from a so-called expert on a topic? So a single presenter presenting for, I don't know, 30 minutes, talking about a topic that you're very much interested in, or are you going to choose the breakout class that has a panel discussing that same topic for 20, 30 minutes? Which one are you going to choose? The individual expert, or are you going to go and listen to the panel of experts on the same topic?
Depends on what I'm trying to achieve. So, since I very much come from a technical perspective, I would probably go with one because you're seeing how one complete flow works. But if you're going for a debatable topic, like what's the best approach for computer security, a panel would be interesting because everyone has a slightly different opinion on it. And in that sense, you want the collective opinion versus the how to protect a computer. Now, how to protect a computer is a really great single topic, but and you can defend against one line of uh, cyber attack, but the panel gives you the variety on the other ways an attack can occur, and so that you're able to get the variety. And so, to more directly answer your question, it comes down to the objective. If you want to know the specifics in single flavors so you don't have to sort out details, one person. If you want to see the conflicting opinions and the commonality so you get a more complete picture, the panel. But it really comes down to what you're trying to do with those two
Well,
different
I also
approaches.
think it depends upon the mood I'm in at the moment too, um, and what my goal is from the conference. If I want in-depth knowledge, I'm going to go to the individual presenter that is supposedly an expert on that topic, because an individual presenter, in theory, will have done the necessary preparation and research on that topic so that I can gain an in-depth knowledge base from that topic. Where if I go to the panel, I feel like that's going to just all be surface level talk. And you talked about debate. Yeah, maybe if you've got some great personalities on that panel, you might be able to witness a pretty interesting debate. But if they're all half asleep, I find panel discussions to be so surface level and sometimes boring, and you're just getting maybe a tidbit here, maybe a tidbit there. But for in-depth knowledge, I think a single presenter is the way to go.
Yeah, uh, that's great because there's again so many different ways to approach it and what you're going for. Now, if I'm going to a Comic Con, I'm probably going to go panel because it's different perspectives on the same thing versus one person telling their entire story, which I'm going. Both are great, but it really comes down to what the objective is.
Yeah. And what you're in the mood for, because if your brain is awake and you're in the mood to gain in-depth knowledge, you might go to the individual presenter. But if you are feeling a little tired, you might only be up to surface level discussion. Well, hey, it's been pretty awesome talking with you today, Mitch. We talked a lot about knowledge and learning in life, right? Did we talk about any
Yep.
logic? I don't think so. But nonetheless, if anybody has any questions or answers about the crabs that pull each other down, make sure you follow up with us in the comments. Let us know, or follow up with us on social media. Check us out on Instagram, TikTok, the Facebook, all the places. And make sure you check in with us next time for the next episode of What Else You Got with Mitch and Margo.